Let's go today. Inspire your troops today. Inspire your troops today.
If you guys want to be remembered forever, this is how you do it.
All right. We win the game. This is a legendary defense. Put up, exclamation point on your work.
It's over, folks. The Pittsburgh Steelers have won the Super Bowl for a sixth-time unprecedented.
It's time now for Black and Gold Central Radio, exclusively on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Let's get those terrible towels waving. And now your host, Mike Batista.
Hey, I wanna taste. You're a black on devil and I can't explain why I wait for your face. You're a hotel lover on the back end dealer this race. Every night she seems to change her name. Doesn't matter who you really are.
Greetings, Yinzers and non-Yinzers alike. Welcome to Black and Gold Central Radio here on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. We are sponsored by Onnit, vitamins and supplements. Pro Football Central listeners can get 10% off vitamins and supplements by going to onnit.com/footballradio. That's Onnit, ONNIT.com. We are tentatively scheduled to have Dan Gigler, the online editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, here as a guest today, and then later we'll have Mike Hoag, co-host of Dog Pound Central, which is the Browns podcast here on Pro Football Central. And that will complete our visits with the other three Pro Football Central AFC North podcasters. We've already talked to Sean Brubaker with Ravens Central and Sean O'Donnell with Bengals Central. And we'll complete our AFC North guests just in time for training camp. And speaking of training camp, later on in the show, I'm going to go over 5 things to watch at training camp for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers begin training camp tomorrow at St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Practices and pads begin on Monday. Now, little stream of consciousness thought here I have about training camp. There are a lot of things you have to deal with when you're an adult. You have to pay bills, you have more responsibility. There's a lot of things about being an adult that just aren't as fun as they were when you were a child. But I gotta say, late July is a lot more fun as an adult than it was when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was on summer vacation and I'd start to see all those back to school sales, all those signs in the windows and everything. Are you kidding me? It's still July. And I hated to be reminded that at some point summer vacation was going to end. And in those days, the Steelers were very mediocre, and training camp isn't covered like it is today. Now, here it is on the eve of Steelers training camp, and myself as well as Steelers fans everywhere have something to look forward to now that it's late July. When I was a kid, I dreaded September. Now, September can't get here soon enough. And before the season, there's going to be obviously 4 preseason games for the Steelers. And, I move heaven and earth to watch all of the Steelers regular season and playoff games. I set up my work schedule so that I could watch all the games. I mean, I think the last game that I had to watch while I was working was 2010. The Steelers, that Sunday night game against the Saints, the Heath Miller fumble there, game the Steelers lost. Halloween of 2010, but so, basically, barring a disaster or a real crisis, I don't miss Steelers games. But that doesn't spill over into preseason games quite yet. But since I've been following the Steelers so closely, even during the off season, I gotta say, even though preseason games are meaningless in the standings, I might have a little bit. There might be a little bit of a draw for me even to watch preseason games, since I really, I've been paying attention to, to all of most of the players on the roster. I mean, if you look at the Steelers roster, I'm interested to see who, if David Gilreath can make the team, or if Mike Farrell from Penn State can win a roster spot or at least make the practice squad on the offensive line. Mike Golick, the son of Mike Golick, the radio host from Notre Dame, can he make the team? I mean, I'm familiar a little bit with all 90 guys, so that actually gives me a little bit of a draw to some of the preseason games. I'm not going to watch all the preseason games because there's no, as far as I know, there's no NFL Sunday ticket for the preseason games. But I'm hoping to at least catch a glimpse of one of them. So, training camp begins tomorrow, and we're going to talk a little bit about training camp with Dan Gigler of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's scheduled to be here, and I say scheduled. And we'll be back with him after this.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central radio network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
We're here with Dan Gigler, the online sports editor of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Hi, Dan. Thank you for coming on.
Hi, great to be here. Thank you.
Now, I got that title right, online sports editor of the Post-Gazette. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Great. It's an honor to have Dan Gigler on Black and Gold Central Radio because this is the guy who taught me what a permalink is. Now,
when was that?
I know, not everyone has the kind of memory that I do, but yeah, I mean, obviously, Dan. One of the things that you do with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is that you link to different Steelers blogs around the blogosphere.
Right.
And yeah, on Blog and Gold, on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette website. And you emailed me one day back in 2007 or 2008.
Oh, man.
And that is when I was doing a website, a Steelers blog called Steelers.com.
Right. Yeah, your old blog. I loved your old blog, yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you told me. You said, I like your blog, but I can't link to it because you don't do
That's right. Now I remember it. You're absolutely right, yeah.
And so finally I added permalinks, and of course the rest is history.
Right, that's right. I wanted to link to it, but it would only link to the front page. I couldn't link to the individual posts. So, yeah, I remember that now. Now that you mentioned it, that was good. Yeah, but great stuff you've been doing ever since. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I've gone to Respect the Towel, and then now Bleacher Report, and now now here on Pro Football Central. And it's funny that I started blogging about the Steelers in 2007, and that was actually before Facebook and Twitter. Well, I mean, Facebook existed, but I wasn't on it yet. That was before I even heard of Twitter, and it's funny, we're talking about 2007 and 2008 back then now, like it was the quaint old days.
Yeah, right. Like we were using, smoke signals or something like that, and Morse code.
Well, and it's funny, and that sort of leads to my first question, Dan. So, sort of describe your job as the online sports editor at the Post-Gazette, and how has it evolved in recent years?
It's evolved tremendously. When I started it in 2006, we had a web presence for a few years at that point, but it was still pretty basic. We weren't doing video on any regular basis at that point. We weren't. We had very rudimentary. We didn't have any blogs, I don't think. We had some very rudimentary chats with our sports editor, but none of our writers were doing them. So that was one of the things we did, is we sort of orchestrated all that. We have multiple videos every day. I used to shoot and edit a lot of those. I don't do that so much anymore, but we did that. We added chats, so you can get on our site. You can talk to Ed Bouchette or Jerry Dulac, or soon Ray Fittipaldo also on the Steelers, as well as our other beats as well. There were no blogs. Of course, regular Steelers fans will be familiar with Ed Bouchette's PG Plus blog, and then I do a sort of a more occasional one called BlackNGold, and we do those for all of our different beat sports. Those were all new things back then, and now they're pretty routine. And then social media changed everything a little bit too, and so it's an evolution, but always, mostly always, pretty interesting.
Yeah, you were talking, Dan, about Ed Bouchette's chats, which are every Tuesday. Now, there was a time when you were involved with moderating that. Now,
Yeah.
it's funny. I look at, I read his chats every Tuesday, and it seems every so often in the chat there's a question that Ed can give one of his funny one-line answers to.
Yes.
Now, when you were moderating it, did you pick questions that you knew Ed could really hit out of the park with a one-liner?
Well, truthfully, I actually say no. He's just good at that. It's a particular talent of his. But actually, when I used to do the format that we do now, it's a little more self-moderating, so he can pick them. But the old software that we used to use, I mean, these questions would just dump in, and I would have to very quickly pick from a list of 300 questions and just start feeding him stuff, because the style that he likes. Some of the other guys that do it, they like to have one question and really methodically answer it, and I think Ed would answer every question in a sentence or less if he could. So, so I would, just feed these questions. And I mean, you would just be amazed, and I would laugh too, though, because some of them wasn't that I was waiting for them to trying to cue him up to deliver a good one-liner, but some of them would come in, I'd be like, oh man, he's just gonna kill this guy. So they were just funny. But the volume, he's our most popular chatter on the site-wide by a mile. I think it's one of those things too where I remember initially I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he was so sort of abrupt with that person. And then I think it's I've encountered people over the years who've oh yeah, I was on Ed Bouchette's chat, and he basically totally like you said, gave a one-liner or whatever, and they kind of took it as a badge of honor to have been maybe not insulted is the right word, but rebuked by the great Ed Bouchette. So it was very funny that happened. I actually met a guy in Las Vegas once at a Steelers bar at the Summerlin, the Hilton Resort in Summerlin, Nevada. There was a Steelers bar in the casino. And this guy was so excited to find out that I worked with Post Gazette. He said, "Oh, I was in Ed Bouchette's chat, and I sent him this question, and he totally gave me one of those wisecrack answers, and he was elated by this. So it is pretty fun."
Yeah. Well, speaking of Ed Bouchette, there, Dan, is Jonathan Dwyer going to want to try to take on Ed Bouchette in the Oklahoma drill at training camp? I actually read a PG Plus this morning, and I know Ed said that Dwyer's no lock to make the roster. He needs to be in better shape. And then Jonathan Dwyer on Twitter said, "I'm out to prove people wrong, especially Ed." Yeah. It's kind of funny, but in my writings too, I've been kind of critical of Jonathan Dwyer, but of course he's not coming out. I'm like, what about me? I'm critical of you too. Aren't you going to come after me? But, but yeah, this is. I mean, you've been with the Post Gazette for a number of years. How routine is that for a player to sort of be? I guess it's really not routine. Social media is still pretty new, so is this sort of the first time that something like this has really happened between Ed and some member of the Steelers through?
Not necessarily. I just sort of anecdotally have heard about that, and whether it was Ed or somebody else here or somebody from another outlet. I think a lot of times these guys act like they don't pay attention to it, but they do. Things get back to them, and sometimes they might give a reporter a cold shoulder or something like that. Maybe a little bit if they were upset by something that they might have said or whatever. But I think I just from what I know of him, he has a good working relationship with these guys, and but when he gives analysis, it's it's very very balanced, and if that's what he said about Jonathan Dwyer, then and if Jonathan Dwyer wants to prove him wrong, then so be it. There's his chance, right?
Yeah, and you, Dan, you've also done some writing on the Steelers, and I actually was, doing my research, and I Googled, Dan Gigler, and like the two stories it was funny, your first two stories that came up were both on June 3rd. The one was June 3rd this year, the other was June 3rd last year.
That is funny.
It's almost like is he the June beat writer? So I imagine some other people must be.
Well, I think that mini camp. I did just the mini camp stuff. So that might have been why that was the case.
Okay, good. So you were at mini camp
or OTAs or whatever. I think those were probably going on around then.
Yeah. So obviously what's going on with the Steelers. So we're gonna get to some Steelers questions here. There are a couple of pretty interesting position battles at training camp, which begins tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
One of them's at running back. We talked about Jonathan Dwyer, but then we also have Isaac Redmond, and then there's Le'Veon Bell, the second-round draft pick, who's a rookie. Who do you see starting for the Steelers at running back in Week 1?
Well, starting. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of analysts sort of like penciled in Bell. And I think that he is the front runner. I mean, they used a very high draft pick on him. They really like him a lot. These other guys have had chances to prove themselves over the past couple of years, and I mean, not the bad cliche or pun given the subject, but they haven't taken the ball and run with it. For lack of a better way to put it. I mean, Isaac Redmond has had some shots and looked good at times, and at times not so much. And same with Jonathan Dwyer. He's shown some flashes, but not a lot of consistency. They both get hurt quite a bit. So, Le'Veon Bell's really going to have a real shot to get that job, and it doesn't mean he will, but he'll definitely get a real crack at it. I think that he just, has a little bit more of a pedigree, and, I think they're very excited about him. I'll put it that way. But the other guys will get the chances too. But again, the fact that they've had a chance, and they still want to go another way with Bell and give him a real crack at it. Sort of speaks maybe a little bit to their confidence that they have in those other guys.
Okay, Jarvis Jones or Jason Worrells? Who's going to start in place of James Harrison?
I think probably Jason Worrells will, and this is why he's not been, he was never James Harrison, of course. I mean, there was only one guy like that. But when he did play, he did get progressively better as time went on, and he got bigger. He's a professional. I mean, he wants his job too, and even if this is his last, to be his last year with the Steelers, he's going to want to have a chance to prove to some other team that might sign him after this year or whatever, that he can play football. So, he's going to be pretty competitive about it. But also, it has to do with frankly, with the complexity of Pickleball's defense. There are not many rookies who come in and start. It takes a while, and even if they fast track Jones, he's still probably going to struggle with it a little bit at the beginning. If you look at that right side, that right out linebacker side, I mean, they've had like a steady line of succession. Going back to to Greg Lloyd. I mean, it went from Lloyd to Gilden to Porter to Harrison, and then they thought maybe with World, but they decided to go with pick Jones too. So you've had this sort of like orderly line of succession where guys are sort of broken in, to learn it before they are starting. Now this might be a different case this year, but I kind of think that World will start, and but Jones is going to get every opportunity also.
I mean, do you think Jones could start eventually? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, he could. I mean, he could, sure. I mean, he's got all the, again, this is a guy that, he dropped a little bit on draft day. The Steelers were able to get him because there was some very minor injury concerns or something of that nature. I can't.
Spinal stenosis.
What's that?
It was spinal stenosis.
That was it. Yeah, right, exactly. But I mean, he's going to be, he's going to be. Believe me, he's going to get an opportunity. He's definitely going to get an opportunity, and it's not out of the question by any stretch.
Do you think, from what you've seen, do you think Heath Miller starts in week 1?
I honestly, I couldn't say that only because I haven't seen much. I mean, I've only just seen, when you talk about what you've seen of him, you've seen more just on college tape. I mean, they've just been doing, the light workouts and OTAs and mini camp and such, and there's not a whole lot to base it on. They'll find out, Monday really when they put the pads on, for real and start doing some drilling that way, because it's frank. I'll be perfectly honest. I mean, it's really hard to tell from anything. You see the bare minimum during these off-season drills and such.
Okay.
But he has to go up against the tackle on on Monday or whatever. But then maybe we'll have a better idea.
Then we'll know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve McClendon, he's sort of slated to start in place of Casey Hampton at nose tackle. It seems to me he'll bring a little bit of a different skill set than Hampton. He can sort of make more splash plays, but it seems to me that Hampton is just more of a rock right there in the middle of the defense. Do you think the Steelers' defense is going to suffer without Hampton clogging up the middle?
I think that's inevitable when you have a guy that was, so good for so long and so big and went to, seemed like was an annual Pro Bowl pick. That is inevitable. Former, he was a first round pick also. So yeah, I mean, it would stand to reason that yes. I mean, even if, Hampton by the end was only a 2-down guy, and had injuries toward the end there. I mean, he was. I mean, he was the, literally the keystone of the whole defense. So, if I don't know if Steve McClendon, can be as good in that role as Hampton was, but yeah, you're right that he does seem to have, a little more mobility, maybe a little more athletic than Hampton, but yes, that he's not. Hampton was like Plymouth Rock there in the middle. So, we'll see.
Okay, Dan. What are your Steelers predictions for the year? What do you see them finishing with as far as record goes, and do you see them making the playoffs?
Oh boy, we were just talking about that earlier today, and it's funny because I remember last year thinking, this is a team that could go 10-6, or they could go 6-10, and instead they split it right down the middle, and they were 8-8, and they were a few plays either way from being one of those other records. I think it could be a similar kind of year. I think that really the key is that if Roethlisberger can stay healthy. I mean, he was having a pretty terrific year last year until he got hurt, and then when he came back. I don't know if it was just coming back from injury, or if in the meantime, coming back from that injury, he had became a father. Those first couple games back, where he was pretty good, the Dallas. You look at the Dallas game and the San Diego game; those were two pretty poor performances by him, and that cost them their season pretty much. I mean, that was the difference between them going to the playoffs or not. So, if he's back to form, and it's really, I mean, it's like a total cliche in football, but it's going to come down to the offensive line. I mean, they have seems like for the first time in forever, they have a good base, a young offensive line. If these guys can stay healthy, all of these guys made strides at different points last year. Mike Adams was just looking good until, seemed to be getting better every game as a rookie until he got hurt. DeCastro, when he finally, obviously started the season hurt, when he finally came in, you saw some flashes and said, boy, this set's going to be pretty good. Pouncey's solid there in the middle. Ramon Foster is really, I think that was like their best off-season signing, was retaining him, because he played very well when he was in there. And also, you could argue that their best draft pick from last season was Kelvin Beachum. He also showed a lot of versatility. They really like him. And then the big question is if Marcus Gilbert's ready to assume the mantle from fellow Florida Gators Max Starks over at left tackle. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to. But these guys gel, they stay healthy. Give him time to throw and give a hand to whatever running back is back there, especially if it's a rookie. Could be all right. I mean, then you're looking a little more, maybe on the 10-6 side. But if that doesn't happen, and the defense is, the secondary shows some signs of aging. Maybe Cortez Allen doesn't, has some growing pains becoming a starter, things of that nature. Maybe the missing Harrison, Worlds or Jones, aren't quite, Jones isn't ready, and maybe Worlds isn't the guy. Missing Hampton, like you said, on defense, then maybe it's the other way. So I hate to put it out on a limb just yet, but I don't know. My gut kind of makes me feel like they might be in the same sort of boat as they were last year.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the offensive line. Sometimes I wonder, Dan, if it really matters how good the Steelers' offensive line is, because of the way Ben Roethlisberger plays. He's always going to run around in the pocket and extend plays, and it just seems like, not sure if any offensive lineman can keep holding blocks every play for 7 or 8 seconds. So, I mean, their offensive line has just not been good really since about like 2007, and they've won a Super Bowl and gone.
Yeah, well, that's a great point. Yeah, but I think the thing is though is and that was sort of the edict when Todd Haley came in, and that's another thing. I mean, everybody's going to have another year of this offense under their belt. That's going to go really, that's going to go miles for helping them. But I think, Ben's 31 years old, and he's taken a tremendous amount of abuse. Even though that is still his style, at some point, you're just gonna see less of that. He's not going to be able to do that as much anymore. So if they can keep him clean, that'll it won't hurt. Put it that way.
Okay, now one last thing, Dan, and it's since you were at the OTAs or the Steelers spring practices. Just from what you've seen, if you could leave us by tell us something we don't know. Just something that you saw that, it could be any little tidbit regarding the Steelers, obviously.
Boy, Ken, I hate to say this because again, you just see so very little. They show so little. Tell us something we don't know. Okay. I would say, okay, here's something. I was talking to somebody that is around the team quite a bit, and we were talking about the rookies, and I said, what do you think about this draft class and everything? And he was very positive. That he said, different maybe than years past is that these are Steeler guys, and they had a good group of Steeler guys, and I think if you follow the team or have for any amount of time, you kind of know what that means, and it maybe echoed a little bit of some of the discussion last year about not that it was a fractured locker room. Because it was not that, but where you had sort of a couple of guys who were kind of maybe on their way out the door, like Mike Wallace, like Keenan Lewis. guys like that who had their contract in mind, but not necessarily the ultimate goals. And I don't know. I just kind of like that. The description was sort of. I liked it. It was sort of vivid. It evoked a certain mentality of when we talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers or whatever, they were Steeler guys. I just like the sound of that.
Good. Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. And it does seem that this year the Steelers whereas in past drafts they just went by best player available. It was sort of,
right.
Now they really they knew they had needs at certain positions, and they addressed those needs, and I kind of like that. I think that's a good thing. Well, usually when I close an interview, Dan, I usually ask where where that person I'm interviewing can be found on Twitter. But you, even though you're on Twitter, I think you said in your profile you find it.
Yeah, well, we were supposed to do this before, and I because I'm not good about it. I'm at Gigs412. And you're welcome to follow me, but I would say I use pithy use of Twitter. I do not make it a lot of folks, and this is certainly not being critical at all, because it's fun to dip in and out of and look at. But if you're expecting a tweet an hour or more from me, you're not going to get it, because I'll go a little periods of time without looking at it. But you can always check the blog, Blog and Gold on the Post Gazette website, and so I'm around.
Okay, well, good. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you. I'd be happy to do it anytime. Just don't mess with me on Twitter about it. Don't direct message me.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
Cigar fans, check out fifthdowncigar.com and enter the coupon code PFC to get 10% off your order. Lots of nice high-end cigars. That's fifthdowncigar.com. Enter the code PFC for 10% off your order.
We are here with Mike Hoag. He is the Dog Pound Central host here on Pro Football Central Radio, and also a Bleacher Report news writer. Thank you for coming on, Mike.
Hey, Mike. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Did I leave anything out? You've got Dog Pound Central and Bleacher Report. Also founder of What's Eating Dan Gilbert. And did I leave anything out there, Mike?
I also contribute to Yahoo Sports sometimes, sporadically, whenever I get a chance. You know how it goes.
Okay. Now, is that on your Twitter profile page, that picture you have, is that the old Memorial Stadium in Cleveland?
Yes, it is. It's not a personal picture. It's just a picture that I found.
Well, yeah. It's just I found it interesting because you had the old pillars there, and then you could tell the football sidelines. I mean, you took it, I think, during a that picture was during a football game, and you could see the old crescent-shaped football sidelines because it's also a baseball field. Good, brings up memories there, that picture. But
right.
Obviously, that was a long time ago when the Cleveland Browns played there. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns in 2013. Now, if you watched the draft, Mike, or whenever you found out, what was your initial gut reaction when the Browns drafted Barkevious Mingo at number 6 overall?
There was so many different directions that they could have gone with the pick, so I honestly wouldn't have been surprised with anything that they did do. A lot of people might have overreacted at first, but I really liked Mingo leading up to the draft, and he has the potential to be a top 10 pass rusher in the NFL, and anytime you can get a guy like that, I think that it's a pretty smart move, especially with the coach that's coming in, and Ray Horton. They'll be able to use him to the best of his ability and put him in spots to succeed. So I like the pick, but initially, like I said, there was other things that they could have done, but it makes the most sense once it's settled in.
Yeah, and I was doing all my pre-draft research, and I actually, Yeah, I didn't think Mingo was gonna fall down to number 17. Obviously, I didn't expect it to happen. But if it did, I just was hoping the Steelers wouldn't draft him because one thing that I think that I saw is that he's basically gonna be a 3-4 outside linebacker in the NFL. And from what I read, I heard that he didn't actually do that. He never played that position in college. So, but then when I was reading after the draft, and Ed Bouchette of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette said that the Steelers loved Mingo. So now, is it any concern of yours that he had limited experience as a 3-4 outside linebacker at the college level?
Yeah, I think there's some concern there. Initially, he's being brought along slowly. He's not expected to start off the bat, so there's some concern that you take a player number 6 overall and he doesn't come in day one and improve your team from the get-go. I mean, and that's to be expected, like you said, that he's making a conversion to a new position. And it's going to be, he's not just rushing the passer or containing the edge. He's going to have to actually drop back in coverage, and that's something that you can't really just learn in the summer. So he'll probably initially be brought in past situations where they'll be sending him at the quarterback. And as soon as he can develop the skills he needs, I don't know if it's going to be that hard for him to do. Jabal Sheard has been picking it up pretty quickly, during the off season as well. So I mean, if Sheard can pick it up, and I'm not really too concerned about Mingo's ability to eventually adapt into that role.
Now, speaking of additions and linebackers for the Cleveland Browns, you have Paul Kruger now. Now, do you think that Paul Kruger can do in Cleveland what he did in Baltimore?
I think Kruger had a really, really excellent second half of the season last year, including the playoffs, and some of that might have been due to Terrell Suggs being brought back and the attention being shifted his way possibly during the second half of the year. And I think that it'll be dependent on how well Sheard's transition goes on the other side of the line. If they can create a balanced pass rush where offensive lines and coordinators can't focus on either one of them, then I think that Kruger will definitely be as successful as he was in Baltimore.
Here's an open-ended question for you, Mike. What are your feelings on Brandon Weeden?
I think that he has everything he needs right this season to succeed. He's got the offensive coordinator, the head coach. They're all supportive of him. They're getting behind him from the sounds of it. In training camp, he's going to be taking 100% of the snaps. So they're definitely liking some of the things that we've all been liking out of his play last season, which it wasn't consistent, but he was a rookie quarterback even at age 29 last season. So he has a very strong arm. He can fit the ball into really tight windows, and he just needs to start making better decisions and finding his second and third reads. And I mean, he can do that with this coaching staff. I'm pretty sure that he can. I think that he'll be a top 15 quarterback this season.
Sounds like, Mike, that you're kind of excited about the new coaching staff. Rob Chudzinski, Norv Turner, offensive coordinator, and Ray Horton. Are you excited about them coming to run the Browns?
Yeah, it has a distant feel to it this season with this coaching staff. I mean, they have a proven track record of almost everywhere they've been. These coaches have succeeded at their jobs. Rob Chudzinski being a first-time head coach, but he has proven over the last few years everywhere they've gone, he's at least tasted some kind of success in what he's done, and he'll have the support of Norv Turner, who has been everywhere in the NFL and has succeeded at every job that he's ever been involved at. His offenses are well known, they're successful, and then Ray Horton, if he can bring the same intensity that he brought in Pittsburgh and in Arizona to the Browns defense this season, then I don't see what's not to be excited about.
Yeah. As a Steelers fan, Norv Turner is sort of like the monster in the closet or the monster under the bed, because when he was the head coach of the Chargers last year, the Steelers had just beaten the Baltimore Ravens. They upset the Ravens in Baltimore, ended their losing streak, and they're 7-5, and they're right in the thick of the playoff race. Ben Roethlisberger's back at quarterback after his injury. And then the Steelers host the Chargers, and the Chargers just went and just kicked their butts. And, with that team coached by Norv Turner. And now I kind of think of the Browns as a team that's on the way up in the NFL. And now Norv Turner is going to be their offensive coordinator. So, as I said, as a Steelers fan, he's that monster in the closet. It's like, oh no, not Norv Turner. It's like, I just want to.
Right.
I wish you would stay as far away from the Steelers as possible. But the Steelers, that's just something the Steelers are going to have to deal with this year. And that brings me, Mike, to my next question. As always, the Steelers and Browns, like they've been doing every year since 1950, with the exception of 96, 97, and 98, they'll be playing each other twice. What are your predictions for those two Steelers-Browns games?
I think this year might be a year we see something a little bit different, and I can go into some of the reasons why, but I think that the Browns are going to win at least one of the two games, and possibly both. Pittsburgh is a couple of injuries away from not being a very competitive team right now. Their depth is lacking. They've lost a couple of key guys, and they've missed on some recent draft picks that isn't typical of their organization. So, and the Steelers are really the wild card right now in the division, I think, more so than the Browns even. It's hard to go against a proven track record like the Steelers organization has, but I think with the type of things that Cleveland's doing and the changes that they're making, if everything goes smoothly, I mean that's an if still, but I'm speaking on the confidence that I have from what I'm seeing from the team. I think that one win is definitely not out of the question, and two wins is a very good possibility this season.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time the Browns actually swept the Steelers.
That's a good thing to look up. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, we might have to go back to 1988 for that, or even sooner. But if I had an intern here, we could do it. But
right.
I got to agree. I'm going to predict a home-and-home split with the Steelers and Browns. We might. Let me see here. Okay. I'm going to have to go ahead and that was my Lumberg from Office Space prediction here, but I'm going to have to go ahead and predict a home-and-home split, just like last year. I see the Steelers as sort of a 9-7 team, and I see the Browns sort of as getting close to that. It's sort of approaching 500. So it's going to be close. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the Browns' defense has been solid. Browns' defense has been pretty solid. And, yeah, it's even last year when they were struggling, they've been solid. And I think the Browns, unfortunately, the gap between the Browns and Steelers is going to get a lot closer. It's going to get a lot closer this year, and we'll have a home-and-home split. What are your predictions record-wise and whether they'll make the playoffs for the Cleveland Browns?
There's starting to be a lot of positive talk about the Browns, but I don't think that the expectations should be that high for this season. I did some predictions earlier in the summer, and I set 9-7 as what I thought they would finish the season, and that was my optimistic but still somewhat realistic prediction, I guess you could say. Yeah, there's so much riding on this season, so many what ifs and different things, but you're definitely right in that they are slowly closing the gap in the AFC North, and their defense. They've added some key pieces this offseason. I mean, there's still a couple of question marks maybe at the number 2 corner spot, and free safety is up for grabs, it seems like, but Sean Gibson is a pretty solid player that, if needed, can step in there. So, I mean, you add the defensive talent that they've been building, and then you add a guy like Ray Horton in, and you disrupt the opposing passing games like the Browns are capable of doing with the talent they have and the schemes that they're going to be employing. And you can stay in any ball games, as you saw last year with the Cardinals. And didn't win very many games, but they made it interesting at times and beat some pretty good football teams just because of their defense alone. So if the defense can carry the Browns and keep opposing offenses in check, I definitely see 9 wins as probably my ceiling, but probably the pick that I'm going to go with, and I'm going to say that they actually reach that ceiling this season.
Okay, so you're predicting a 9-7 record.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and again, it's almost going to be just like last year, the 2 times that the Steelers and Browns play each other, because they're going to be playing in week 12 and then again in week 17. And I think the week 12 matchup, the week 12 matchup, November 24th, is in Cleveland, and then the week 17 matchup is going to be, which will finish the regular season, is going to be at Pittsburgh. So I think they actually played in those exact weeks last year too. It's funny how the schedule is becoming, or at least with the Steelers-Browns game, is going to be so similar to the way it was last year. Now, I have 1988 is the last time that the Cleveland Browns swept the Pittsburgh Steelers, and stands to reason.
I'd say that they're due just about.
Yeah, the Steelers were 5-11 last year. That was the only time since 1972, since the Immaculate Reception. That was the only year the Steelers didn't win at least 6 games, was 1988, when they went 5-11 and were swept by the Cleveland Browns. And not only that, but they lost 51-0 at home to the Browns in the 1989 season opener. So it was the rivalry was a little bit different back then, and it's going to be. And I tend to agree that it will be a little bit more on even footing a little bit going forward. So, thank you for coming on, Mike. Where can we find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Mike HOAGJR.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for coming on. Good luck with the Browns this year for 14 other games.
Right.
Besides the games when they play the Steelers. And good luck with Bleacher Report and Pro Football Central.
Hi, Mike. Hey, thanks a lot for having me on today. I'm looking forward to hopefully a renewal of the rivalry this year.
Okay, good. That was Mike Hoag, the Dog Pound Central host here on Pro Football Central, here on Black and Gold Central. And we had Dan Gigler from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on earlier. So Cleveland and Pittsburgh were both represented. And tomorrow, and we've also visited with all 3 of my fellow AFC North podcasters here on Pro Football Central. Yeah, that Browns-Steelers rivalry, the gap is narrowing a little bit between the Browns and the Steelers. I think the Steelers might be hearing some footsteps this year, and I predict the home-and-home split with the Steelers and Browns. Unfortunately, the way things are with the Steelers now, splitting with the Browns really is kind of a step back, but unfortunately I kind of see it happening this year. Training camp begins tomorrow for the Steelers. They practice in pads beginning on Monday. I'm going to quickly go over 5 things that we need to watch for in training camp. And I went over a couple of these things with Dan Gigler earlier. The first thing is, are they going to put Heath Miller? The Steelers going to put Heath Miller on the physically unable to perform list. He tore 3 ligaments in his knee in Week 16 last year, the second to last game of the season, and he had surgery, and he's been rehabbing. And so no one really knows if he's going to be ready to go in Week 1. And if they put him on the physically unable to perform list, he won't be able to practice. And if he doesn't practice at all in training camp, then when the season starts, he'll be able to go on the reserve physically unable to perform list. But if the Steelers do that, then he won't be able to play or practice for 6 weeks. That would be the downside of that. The upside would be he wouldn't be taking a spot on a 53-man roster. But if Heath Miller is able to practice at all during training camp, then all of those options are off the table, and then he would be, if he can't play during the regular season, he would be taking up a roster spot. So Heath Miller was the team's MVP last year, and he really is a central part of the Steelers' offense. Ben Roethlisberger really needs Heath Miller to go to, in the red zone, and also as just a quick option to avoid pass rush. So if he is still on the PUP list when the regular season begins, that means he can't play for 6 weeks. And I think the general consensus is, and certainly the Steelers' hope is, that he can play before week 6. I think the Steelers might be in a little bit of trouble if Heath Miller can't go before week 6. So hopefully Heath Miller can practice at some point during training camp. That's something to watch for. The second thing to watch for are the position battles. Jarvis Jones or Jason Worlds at outside linebacker. I tend to agree with Dan Gigler. I think Jason Worlds will start in week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if Jarvis Jones takes over at some point during the season. The ideal thing would be for Worlds to start, have a great year, get a big contract somewhere else, and then Jarvis Jones comes, and he's waiting in the wings, and he comes and he just seamlessly takes over next year in 2014 in week 2. Le'Veon Bell, Jonathan Dwyer, or Isaac Redmond starting, they're battling it out to start at running back in week 1. I think the Steelers really need Le'Veon Bell to be the week 1 starter. They need a consistent running game, not only to take the heat off Ben Roethlisberger, the pass rush, but they need to move the chains, and they also need a running game to be able to hold fourth quarter leads, to really take time off the clock in the fourth quarter. They really didn't have that last year. And I wasn't going to take up Dan Gigler's time with this, but there also was a position battle at punter. Brian Moorman, he's 37 years old, but he's a 2-time Pro Bowler. He made one of the All-Decade teams for the 2000s. The Steelers brought him in to compete with Drew Butler, who was so-so last year as a rookie punter. I kind of wouldn't mind seeing Brian Moorman win that job as long as he still has it. And from what I've read, it seems like he did show pretty well during the Steelers' spring practices. Number 3, what we need to watch for in training camp is the Steelers' offensive line. Ed Bouchette of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette said today, don't count out Kelvin Beachum to be a starter this year somewhere on that offensive line. And Dan Gigler said that he could have been their best draft pick of the 2012 draft. And Beachum was chosen in the 7th round. He was 4 or 5 picks away from being Mr. Irrelevant. He was the Steelers' last pick. Beachum can play guard and tackle. And the Steelers are slated to have, going left to right, Marcus Gilbert at left tackle, Ramon Foster at left guard, Marquise Pouncey at center, David DeCastro at right guard, and Mike Adams at right tackle on the offensive line. Beachum, I don't know, does Beachum replace David DeCastro? I'm not sure about that. I think they're going to give last year's first-round draft pick a chance to really show that he can excel in that spot. They re-signed Ramon Foster at the other guard position. It was sort of a surprise that they re-signed him. Maybe one of the tackle spots, is Kelvin Beachum, is he gonna be protecting Ben Roethlisberger's blind side, left tackle this year? I don't know. I mean, I'm not too crazy about Marcus Gilbert there. Supposedly Marquise Pouncey has had to get after Gilbert a little bit to really, during practice to really work hard. So, but whatever the Steelers do at the offensive line, they need to pick 5 guys who are going to play together for most of the season, and they need to stay healthy. Whatever happens, they need 5 guys who are basically going to form a unit, who are used to playing with each other, and hopefully play all 16 games together. That was the formula the New York Giants used for winning the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So, we don't want a revolving door at offensive line this year. These guys need to stay healthy, And we need a 5-man unit that plays most of the season together. Wide receiver. Antonio Brown is going to be the Steelers' #1 receiver this year. He needs to get back to his 2011 form when he was the Steelers' team MVP. Had a couple of costly fumbles last year. He was still productive last year, but a couple of lapses, and he needs to cut that out of his game, and he really needs to really be that top receiver this year. Emmanuel Sanders moves into the #2 receiver spot. As the #2 receiver, Emmanuel Sanders is going to have to show that he's more than a 44-catch player. He caught 44 passes last year, and that was his career high. I think from a #2 receiver, the Steelers are going to need a little bit more than that. Of course, he's in a contract year, so even if Sanders re-signs somewhere else for a big contract next year, I'll take it. If he catches 80 passes this year, has a huge year, helps the Steelers go deep in the playoffs, I'll take one great year from Sanders and let him sign somewhere else next year. Steelers have salary cap problems. They're not going to be able to keep every player that they want. Also, with the wide receiver position, can Marcus Wheaton, this year's #3 draft pick, can he do what the Steelers' 2009 third-round draft pick, Mike Wallace, did as a rookie? Steelers are going to need Wheaton to really take hold and take ownership of that #3 wide receiver position and really have an impact. I mean, they really do need 3 receivers who can be productive. And if Marcus Wheaton comes along too slowly, then you're looking at Jericho Cotchery. He's 31 years old. He's had 33 catches in 2 years with the Steelers. He would be ideal as the #4 receiver, possession receiver. Steelers do like to go to him in the red zone a little bit. Hopefully, with Mike Wallace gone, there's more balls to go around, and Cotchery can be a little bit more productive this year. And let's see, too, what Plaxico Burress can do with a full training camp under his belt, a full off-season. The Steelers didn't call him last year until the middle of the season, so he was pretty much starting out cold turkey. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do with training camp under his belt. And he could be the #4 receiver. If he's the #5 receiver, he might have to play he would have to play special teams, which he's not going to do. So, as I said earlier in one of our previous episodes of Black and Gold Central, for Burress to make the team, it's really going to have to be as the #4 receiver. He'll probably have to beat out Jericho Cotchery, I think, to make the team. Justin Brown was the Steelers' 6th-round draft pick this year. It doesn't seem like a lot is expected of him, but the more I think about Justin Brown, the more I think maybe he can actually do something. Maybe he can register on the radar screen as a rookie this year. He also can return punts, and he's 6'3", so Ben Roethlisberger loves those tall receivers. So they're at least going to keep Justin Brown around on the practice squad this year. And he had a breakout season. He transferred to Oklahoma from Penn State in the wake of the Penn State scandal. And he caught 73 passes at Oklahoma in 2012, which is as many catches as many receptions as he had in all of his years at Penn State combined. So keep an eye on Justin Brown. And that brings me to the last, but certainly not least, thing that we need to look out for, or that we need to watch for in Steelers training camp. The Steelers need a leader. Hines Ward's gone. James Farrier is gone. James Harrison's gone. Casey Hampton's gone. A lot of the veteran leadership is Aaron Smith. A lot of the veteran leadership has gone in the last couple of years. The Steelers need somebody who can be an on-the-field and off-the-field leader. I've been thinking about Lawrence Timmons. Now, I saw a picture of Lawrence Timmons in the Post-Gazette on Blog and Gold earlier this off season, and I saw his picture. I'm like, oh, that's what he looks like? This guy keeps a low profile, which might be one of the reasons he's never been to any Pro Bowls, but he is the best player on the Steelers defense as it stands right now. But he keeps a low profile, and he's not as visible as other players on the Steelers defense. But I've noticed he's been quoted in a couple of stories I'm reading on the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. There was a story about Cameron Hayward in which Lawrence Timmons was quoted heavily in. So it seems like Lawrence Timmons, he's at least talking a little bit more with the press. In a Bleacher Report article that I wrote to sort of off-season power rankings for all players on the Steelers roster, I ranked Timmons number 1. So obviously, Heath Miller was the Steelers MVP last year, but he went into the offseason injured. Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers can't win without him, but he also went into the offseason injured. So in terms of power rankings for the offseason, in my book, Lawrence Timmons is number 1. So I guess that translates to Lawrence Timmons entering camp as the Steelers' best player. And he just turned 27, so we still have a lot of good years left with Lawrence Timmons. He had an off year in 2011, but he was playing an unnatural position. They had to use him at an outside linebacker a lot. Obviously, where he really excels is his regular position at inside linebacker. So if he can really take his game to the next level, good enough to actually be noticed, and maybe become a Pro Bowler, and really become a defensive game changer. He returned an interception for a touchdown against the Browns last year. He had that overtime interception against the Chiefs in the game that Ben Roethlisberger got hurt. He really is the next generation game changer for that Steelers defense, maybe taking the torch from Troy Polamalu. So hopefully he can take that next step on the field and off the field as well, and really fill that leadership void for the Steelers. And I think on the offensive side, I'd like to see Antonio Brown do that as well. Really become a leader. The Steelers need that. The Steelers really need that. So we're gonna be coming to a close here. We have training camp to look forward to tomorrow, and we'll certainly be doing further episodes of Black and Gold Central during training camp. And as always, we are sponsored by Onnit. Pro Football Central radio listeners get 10% off vitamins and minerals by going to onnit.com/footballradio. And that's Onnit, ONNIT.com. You can follow Black and Gold Central on Twitter. On Black and Gold Central, it's black, the letter N, gold, Black and Gold Central. Or just type in BNG Central and you can find us. We'd love to have more followers, and I'd really like to hear feedback from you, what you'd like to see on the show, if you agree or disagree with any of my points. You can follow me on Twitter on Steel Tweets. That's STEL_tweets. And you're also going to want to like our Pro Football Central Facebook page. That's definitely something that you're going to want to click the like button on Facebook. Trust me, you won't be sorry. But until August, we will be signing off, and for now, that's a wrap.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.